The familiar scent of linseed oil and aged mahogany usually brought me a quiet satisfaction, a sense of purpose. Today, it just felt like a distant echo, a ghost of my usual routine. My hands, accustomed to the delicate dance of restoration, felt strangely clumsy as I packed the last of my essential tools. Each chisel, each brush, each tiny vial of solvent had its designated spot in the custom-built travel case, yet the process lacked its usual meditative rhythm. I was leaving my meticulously organized life, my small, quiet apartment above the antique shop, for something entirely unknown. My life had always been about precision, about bringing forgotten beauty back into the light. The careful removal of centuries of grime, the patient mending of fractured wood, the subtle regilding of a faded frame, these were my constants. They required an almost obsessive attention to detail, a singular focus that left little room for the chaotic whims of human connection. I preferred the silent companionship of objects, their histories whispering through their imperfections. Now, a different kind of history awaited me, one I hadn't chosen. The journey was long, stretching into the kind of gray, drizzly afternoon that feels less like weather and more like a mood. The landscape grew progressively wilder, the neat rows of suburban houses giving way to sprawling fields, then dense, ancient woodland. The road, once smoothly paved, became a winding ribbon of cracked asphalt, choked with weeds that clawed at the undercarriage of my sedan. Isolation was a word I understood intellectually, but as the miles stacked up, I began to feel its true weight pressing in. Cell service had vanished miles ago, leaving me with only the hum of the engine and the increasingly heavy silence. Finally, a break in the trees revealed it. The Manor. It didn't so much stand as sagged, a hulking silhouette against the bruised sky. Windows, like vacant eyes, stared out from under heavy brows of ivy, many of them shattered or boarded up. The roofline was a jagged mess, slates missing like teeth from a decaying jaw. A rusty wrought-iron gate, half off its hinges, guarded a gravel driveway swallowed by overgrown weeds. This wasn't just old, it was ancient, bearing the weight of generations of neglect like a shroud. My initial thought was a professional one, the sheer scale of the undertaking. This wasn't a piece of furniture, it was a behemoth of decay. The challenge, I told myself, was immense, but not insurmountable. My determination, usually a steady flame, flickered in the face of such overwhelming dilapidation. Yet, beneath that professional assessment, a thread of unease began to unravel. The air here was different, thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else, a musty, cloying sweetness that was vaguely unpleasant, like forgotten potpourri mixed with the tang of rust. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The front door, a massive slab of oak studded with iron, hung slightly ajar, as if inviting me in, or perhaps simply too exhausted to remain closed. It groaned in protest as I pushed it further, revealing a cavernous entrance hall. My footsteps echoed, each one magnified, bouncing off walls that seemed to recede into perpetual gloom. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light filtering through grimy windows, like tiny, frantic spirits. I pulled a small, powerful LED flashlight from my bag. The banister, once polished wood, was now rough and splintered, its surface fuzzy with years of accumulated dust. My gaze drifted to a large, ornate grandfather clock standing against the far wall. Its face was cracked, its hands frozen at 3:15. But it wasn't the broken clock that caught my eye. It was the peculiar, almost deliberate way a single, small, tarnished silver locket lay on the dusty floor directly in front of it, as if recently dropped. It wasn't an antique of any particular value, just a simple, heart-shaped piece, dull with age. It felt out of place, too small, too personal amidst the grandeur of the decaying hall. A faint prickle of curiosity, tinged with that growing unease, started to bloom. Who would have dropped it? And why here, of all places? I knelt, reaching for it, but hesitated. My fingers hovered just above the cold metal. It wasn't just dust clinging to it, there was a faint, almost imperceptible film, like a residue. I pulled my hand back, a sudden reluctance seizing me. It felt wrong to touch. As I straightened, a low, drawn-out groan reverberated from somewhere deep within the house, a sound like old timbers settling, or a great beast stirring from a long slumber. It wasn't violent, but it was deep, resonant, and utterly unsettling. My heart gave a little lurch. The house wasn't just old, it felt alive, a vast, sleeping presence. I thought of my familiar workshop with power tools and guards, the hum of the sander, the sharp scent of fresh-cut wood, the reassuring solidity of my everyday. The comfortable routine of my life seemed impossibly far away. I swallowed, the taste in my mouth like dust. This was going to be more than just a restoration. I could feel it, an unspoken promise of something far older and deeper than I could possibly imagine. The manor's silence had a new quality now, not just vast and empty, but expectant. It pressed in, a thick blanket muffling even my own footsteps as I carried my packed supplies from the grand, echoing foyer towards what I designated as my primary workspace. My chosen location for the bulkier restoration projects, the workshop with power tools and guards, was an outbuilding connected to the main house by a covered walkway. It was designed for heavy-duty work, a practical space meant to isolate the noise and dust from the living quarters. I'd chosen it specifically for its robust construction and its distance, a place where I could make a mess without worrying about the delicate period features inside. Inside, the workshop smelled of old oil and concrete, a stark contrast to the manor's decaying grandeur. It was equipped with heavy workbenches, industrial lighting, and, as its name suggested, a comprehensive array of power tools, each with its own designated guard for safety. I'd spent the last few days getting it ready, cleaning years of grime from the surfaces, testing the circuits, and sharpening blades. My own tools, the more delicate chisels and brushes, found their home in carefully organized drawers. My first project, I decided, would be a massive oak desk I'd found tucked away in a shadowed corner of the manor's study. It was a beast of a thing, its surface scarred, its drawers swollen and stiff. I wanted to start with something tangible, something that would demand my full, physical attention, hoping the sheer effort would anchor me. I wheeled the desk into the workshop, its casters groaning under the weight, and positioned it beneath the brightest overhead lamp. I began with the simplest task, cleaning. Hours passed in a focused blur of soft cloths and specialized solvents, stripping away layers of neglect. The oak grain slowly emerged, a rich tapestry of history, each scratch and dent telling its own silent story. The rhythm of my work was usually meditative, but today, a subtle undercurrent of unease rippled beneath my concentration. It started small. I reached for my favorite wood plane, a well-balanced tool I'd owned for decades, and it wasn't in its usual spot on the magnetic strip above the workbench. I scanned the area, my brow furrowed. Had I put it back in its case? No, I was sure I hadn't. I checked the other side of the desk, then the floor. Nothing. A flicker of annoyance, then I chalked it up to being distracted by the new environment. I picked up a different plane, equally good, and continued. A few minutes later, as I bent to retrieve a rag, I saw it. My favorite plane, resting neatly on a stack of sandpaper sheets, a place I never put tools. My breath hitched, a small, involuntary sound. I must have moved it myself and simply forgotten. The manor was getting to me already, making me absent-minded. That was it. I switched on more lights, banishing the encroaching gloom. I was sanding a particularly stubborn patch on the desk's top when I heard it, a faint, dragging sound, like something being pulled across rough stone. It came from the main manor, through the covered walkway. I paused, the orbital sander humming idly in my hand, my ears straining. The sound didn't repeat. Just the wind, perhaps, or the old house settling. It was vast, and full of strange echoes. I tried to refocus, but the thread of my concentration was fraying. My eyes kept darting to the workshop door, then to the windows, half expecting to see something. Later, as I was applying a fresh coat of linseed oil, bringing out the oak's deep luster, I saw it. A movement. Not a distinct shape, but a shift in the air, a ripple at the very edge of my vision, near the far corner of the workshop where the heavier machinery stood. My hands paused, the oil brush hovering over the wood. My heart gave a clumsy lurch, thudding against my ribs. I stood absolutely still, listening, watching. The heavy tools, the concrete floor, the very air in the workshop felt charged, suddenly. Empty, but not alone. A shiver traced its way down my spine, despite the relative warmth of the workshop. The feeling wasn't just of unease anymore, it was a profound sense of observation. Someone, or something, was here. Watching me. The thought was absurd. I was the only person for miles. I forced myself to breathe, to rationalize. My imagination was simply running wild in this isolated, ancient place. As I ran my fingers along the inside edge of the drawer, I felt a slight irregularity. A hidden catch. My heart quickened, a different kind of excitement now, the familiar thrill of discovery. I pressed, and a small, shallow compartment sprang open. It was heavy, intricately engraved with swirling, almost organic patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in the dim light. I picked it up, feeling the cold metal in my palm. The engravings weren't merely decorative, they depicted figures, indistinct and elongated, intertwined with what looked like bare branches or grasping tendrils. It was unsettling. I tried to open it, but the clasp was stiff, perhaps fused with age. As I turned it over, I noticed something else on the back, etched in a tiny, almost imperceptible script. Not a name. Not a date. Just a single, disturbing word, mnemosyne. The word resonated in the quiet workshop, echoing in my mind. It was Greek, I knew. The Titan goddess of memory. My grip tightened on the locket. It was listening. And for the first time, I felt a genuine tremor of fear. This wasn't just an old house, it was a hungry one. And it had just offered me a taste. The air grew heavier, colder, as I approached the stout oak door at the far end of a seldom-used corridor. This was it, the workshop with power tools and guards. The guards weren't men, of course, but the thick, bolted iron plates reinforcing the door, and the heavy mesh screens over the windows, installed by a previous owner paranoid about break-ins or perhaps just the elements. It felt like stepping into a forgotten vault, a place built for containment as much as creation. The air inside was stale, tasting of sawdust and disuse, a faint metallic tang lingering beneath it all. I spent the next few days in a rhythm that, for a time, felt almost normal. My hands, accustomed to the delicate dance of restoration, found their purpose again. I started with a large, ornate mahogany armoire I'd found tucked away in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Its finish was dulled, veneer peeling in places, but the underlying craftsmanship was superb. It was the kind of piece that spoke of generations, of secrets whispered into its dark wood. I set up my worklight, the focused beam cutting through the workshop's gloom. The hum of the industrial dust extractor became a comforting drone. Hours bled into one another as I meticulously stripped away layers of grime and old polish. The armoire's left side, in particular, seemed stubbornly resistant to my efforts. The wood here felt denser, almost unnaturally solid, despite the superficial damage. I ran my fingers over it, searching for any anomaly. My tools, usually precise, seemed to balk, scraping rather than smoothly removing the finish. Frustration, a rare visitor in my careful work, began to prickle. I switched to a finer chisel, applying more pressure, and felt a subtle shift. Not the give of old wood, but a faint, almost imperceptible recess. I paused, my brow furrowed. This wasn't a repair, not a patch. It felt structural. With renewed focus, I worked carefully around the area, picking away at the stubborn finish, then the underlying wood itself. It was slow, painstaking work, each sliver removed revealing more of the hidden truth. Beneath what appeared to be solid mahogany, a thin seam began to emerge. It was almost invisible, meticulously crafted to blend with the grain, a testament to an artisan's skill at deception. My heart picked up a beat. This was it. A hidden compartment. I reached in, my fingers brushing against something brittle, papery. I pulled it out. It was a small, leather-bound journal, its cover flaking, its pages yellowed and brittle. No title, no author. Just a series of dates, mostly in the late 18th century, and sprawling, cramped handwriting. The ink was faded, but legible. I carefully opened it, the scent of dust and something else, something dry, like ancient potpourri, but with an underlying sharpness, rising from the pages. The entries weren't a coherent narrative, but fragmented observations. The implication was clear, something in this house, perhaps in the very land it stood upon, consumed identity, leaving behind only echoes. This wasn't local gossip or a diary of mundane anxieties. This was a record of something predatory, something that took. I leaned back against the workbench, the journal clutched in my hand, my mind racing. Who wrote this? What did they mean by names forgotten? My gaze drifted around the workshop, to the heavy doors, the barred windows. The guards suddenly felt less like protection and more like a cage. Just then, my eye caught a peculiar detail on the armoire itself. A small, almost imperceptible scratch near the base, one I was sure I had noticed and intended to buff out, but it looked different now. Sharper. Had I already dealt with it? I frowned, reaching out to touch it. No, I hadn't, or had I? A strange, fleeting blankness washed over me. I stood there for a moment, my hand hovering, the journal still open in the other. What was I doing? I had just been thinking about something important, something about the journal, or the armoire, or... What was it? The thought, fully formed just moments ago, had simply evaporated, leaving behind a faint, unsettling residue of absence. I shook my head, rubbing my temples. Too much caffeine, too little sleep. The isolation was getting to me, playing tricks. I attributed it to stress, to the sheer overwhelming nature of the task ahead. It wasn't just the house that felt different now. Something in me did too.